Welcome to the Andrew Baker podcast. I just got off the phone with Fletcher. What an incredible freaking dude. Something that I personally am taking away from this call, Fletcher talks about this idea of if you want to view yourself as something other than what you are, if you want to view yourself as more resourceful, what you need to do is build and find so much evidence that you are resourceful. Here's the punchline, that it actually becomes painful to act in any other way. Build so much evidence that you are great at basketball, a great golfer, whatever it is, great at podcasting, a better father. Build so much evidence in favor of that opinion, of that belief, that acting any other way is legitimately and genuinely painful. What a conversation. This is the Andrew Baker podcast. This is a podcast for an audience of one, myself. But if you are here listening, reading, watching, I hope you enjoy it as well.
So who I am, my name is Fletcher Ellingson. Like yourself, I've got a lot of roles: father, husband, friend. But who I am is I am a clearing for people to feel safe, heard, and empowered. And what I do is I help people change the way they think. And when I say I help them change the way they think, I do not mean just like changing their opinion about a political issue or something. What I mean is I help them change the way they process, the way data is coming into their mind, being filtered, and being analyzed. Uh, I literally help my clients create new neural networks so they can begin thinking differently about themselves and the world. As a result of that, they have access to producing outcomes that they didn't have access to producing before. They knew of the outcomes, right? They knew that the outcomes existed, but they didn't have access to producing them because of all the limitations that they had in their brain. And so when you put down new neural networks, you literally are creating highways, new roads, right? That allow you to produce new outcomes. It's kind of like the best example I can give you is like, let's say you want to go from Washington to Oregon, and you got one highway, right? And it's like jammed up, and there's weather conditions, and then you say, well, gosh, you know what? If I could get there another way, but we need to build new roads, right? So that's what we're doing. We're helping people to get to their destination by building these new pathways that allow for faster travel, more efficient travel, whatever. But you get the
Yeah.
analogy,
So
right?
the way I understand it, and I'm gonna misremember the book that I had first listened to that taught me about this idea, and it's called myelination, right? Where you're literally forming like a new myelin sheath around
Yes.
these. And I think your analogy of a road is, I think, spot on to what they talk about in this book, because like the getting from point A to point B, like it's always been there. It will always be there. But what you're actually doing is just create like making the travel easier. Cause like literally our brains are
Yeah.
just like literally they're electrical, and um
Yes.
and just like humans, water, electricity, we always take the path of least resistance. So my understanding is that
Yep.
the more we use this neural pathway, actually what we're doing is creating less electrical resistance between these, in these synapses and along the same mental route. Is that, do I have a pretty good
Yeah.
understanding of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And that is how. So what we're talking about is how a human being thinks, right? So a lot of my clients, when I ask them, like, well, would you agree that the way you think has something to do with the outcomes that you're producing? And they all say, yeah, of
Duh.
course,
Come
right?
on. Yeah.
So I say, so if you, right? So if I say, but if you want radically new outcomes, it may require a new way of thinking. Okay, they're with me. Yep, got it. But then my next question is, so how do you change the way you think? Now, now that's a little harder to figure out. How do I think? I don't know. I've just always thought. I just think, right? We never were taught how we actually think or how to change the way we think. And so when I say change the way you think, I mean change the way I view something completely, like viewing it newly. So for instance, some people feel very inadequate. They feel very limited. They feel very dependent. And so for me to suggest to them, what if you viewed yourself as resourceful, capable, and flexible? What if you, what would be possible in your life if you believed that you were actually resourceful, capable, and flexible? What would be possible? And what would be possible would be anything if you were resourceful, capable, and flexible, right? So they get the idea that it's possible to think that way about themselves, but they don't think that way about themselves. And so when I say I'm helping them think differently, I'm taking them on the journey from knowing that they could see themselves as resourceful, capable, flexible, to actually thinking they are. And so there's a leap there, right? There's some work that has to be done. And what's awesome is when people embrace this idea of, you know what, I'm actually resourceful, capable, flexible. When you begin to see yourself as that, I start getting these incredible emails and texts, and they frequently start this way: Fletcher, you're never going to believe what just happened, right? And it's so exciting to get those because I know the next sentence is going to be about something they created, an outcome they created, because they are now stepping into this concept of actually thinking they are resourceful, capable, and flexible. It's really exciting.
And the feelings that come up, you know, it was a hypothetical question. You weren't actually asking me, like, how do you change the way you think,
Right.
right? Like, I know it was hypothetical, but it's almost like in, you know, shit, Fletcher, maybe I'm just a basket case. Like, that's totally, but I hear that even, I'm sure a lot of people feel that there's almost, if I could put it into words, it feels like I'm driving down a road and I look and the road's gone and there's just this chasm. That's kind of the feeling. It's like, how do I, it feels so daunting because I think we're using the word think, but that's probably not the word to accurately describe it. There's something more profound. There's something almost ancient. I don't know. I think I use that word a little too much. There's something primal about it because it's, you know, because thought is usually, it's not passive, it's very active, like you actively think, whereas I feel like the things that you're talking about, it's like I don't want to have to actively think I'm resourceful. I want to just believe it and passively
Yeah.
have that belief instead of an active thought, which I'm sure is, you know, it's just semantics at this point, but it feels like such a daunting, the road's over there, the road of self-belief and everything. There's the road, but there's this chasm, and I don't know how to freaking change like how I believe, you know, myself to be like
Yeah.
it's daunting.
So you're asking, sure, yeah. So you're asking a really good question. How do I change the way I believe? It seems daunting. Like it seems like a lot of work. Like how do I learn that? It must require a lot of
Yeah.
effort, right? So let's break it down, because it's very fascinating, and we can nutshell this for you and your audience. The way people change. All right. So let's give you an example. We most people in our country, when they were very young, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, we all believed in this thing called Santa Claus.
That we did.
All right. Most of us, right? All right. Yeah. And we believed wholeheartedly. We believed like we would, if we were, if at that age we had $1 million and we knew what gambling and betting was, we would place all of it on this idea that Santa Claus existed. We would risk it all,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
We were all in on Santa Claus. And what a belief is simply a feeling of certainty. That's all a belief is. And you can use the words interchangeably. Well, I believe that Biden should. I feel certain that Biden should. Well, I believe Trump should. I feel certain that Trump should. I believe the school system. I believe the government. I believe blah, blah, blah. What you're saying is, I feel certain. I have a sense of certainty. And so at an early age, we all had a 100% certainty that this Santa Claus guy existed. And the other way a belief, and the way a belief is set up, the way a belief is formed, or a certain feeling of certainty, is we collect evidence to support this idea. So the idea, there's this thing called Santa Claus. Okay, well, I'm not going to believe in it yet until you show me the evidence. And so at a young age, we're presented with mass amounts
The
of
cookies are
evidence.
gone in the morning. Mom and dad put flour on
Yes.
the boots. Like there's boot tracks leading to the chimney.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right. There are songs, there are storybooks. We see there are shows on TV. We see Santa Claus at the mall, right? And most importantly, our parents are telling us. So we have collected massive evidence. If we were in a court of law and arguing for Santa Claus, oh boy, we got a lot of evidence, right? And then what happens? At some point, somebody introduces an idea that is contrary to this, our feeling of certainty. And that what they're introducing is Santa Claus is actually not real. It's your parents, you silly kid. And of course we go home, we're like, oh my gosh, Billy said that Santa Claus is not real. Billy doesn't know anything, right? Oh, that's what I thought too, right? But eventually we start picking up on some new evidence. We find some presents hidden in the hallway closet or under the bed. We recognize the writing, right? We catch Santa Claus in the act and see it's actually our parents, right? We eventually amass a new body of evidence. And this body of evidence is so compelling, so absolutely compelling, that we have a new sense of certainty. Now it's a belief. And we now cannot even go back to our old belief. That's how certain it is. And that's how a belief and thinking is formulated. And so what I help my clients do is we come up with an idea that says, I'm resourceful, capable, and flexible, or I can run a triathlon, or I can lose this weight and keep it off, or I can find the person of my dreams, or I can make 6 figures, or whatever it is. And we begin collecting massive amounts of evidence for that. And my clients begin to feel so certain that the process becomes easy. And then they begin to see the evidence, the manifestation of the outcome that they want. And that's what leads to those cool emails that I get. Fletcher, you're never going to believe what happened, right? Because now they're operating from a sense of certainty around their new belief.
You said something really interesting there about people learning to enjoy the journey more after they've collected. Do you think that's a result of just performing actions that are in line with their new way of thinking? Or is this related to competency? And I'm sure you're going to say it's actually related to both, but I'm just curious in your experience, what level competency has had. And the reason I ask that, I'm learning to be better, and I am getting better. There
Hmm.
are very few things
Hmm.
in life that I've learned to just completely enjoy for the sake of doing it. There, almost everything I do, I have an extremely difficult time detaching from the possible outcomes of that thing, for better or for worse. One of the few things that I really feel like I've learned to just love and be really consistent with is actually weightlifting, like going to the gym. And it's been years now, but there's no way I felt this much love and okayness with just the journey at the beginning. But I've also gained a
Yeah.
significant amount of competence reading research, listening to experts. Um, it's, if I have an expertise, it's weightlifting, gaining muscle,
Hmm.
and working out. And so I'm curious where competency, from your perspective, plays a role in this.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So competency doesn't necessarily play a role in this, but it can magnify the
Mm,
experience,
yeah.
right? See, you weren't competent when you first started weightlifting. You were a newbie, right? You were figuring it out. And what what I think is allowing you to enjoy it so much, and why people enjoy things is because this thing called appreciation. Now, appreciation is one of the coolest secrets to life. So when people purchase a home, the home, in theory, is going to appreciate in value, right? It's going to increase in value. Now, sometimes it will depreciate, but most oftentimes it appreciates, and we're buying it with the intention of appreciating, right? So that means it's going up in value. So here's the thing. This thing called appreciation is like a magic wand. You appreciate weightlifting. You appreciate this industry around weightlifting. You appreciate the act of, you appreciate going to the gym. You appreciate, again, let's swap out the word, because appreciation means to increase in value. So what you're doing when you appreciate weightlifting, what you're saying is you're valuing it. You're increasing the value. The more you appreciate it, the more you're valuing it. So I said it's like a magic wand. If you want to increase the value of a person, you begin to appreciate them. Like if you want to appreciate your wife, if you want to increase the value of your wife in your own mind, begin appreciating her. Like, oh man, I love all the things that she does for me. And you pay attention to the things that she's doing, and you literally out loud, like, I really appreciate the fact that, she helps with the keeping the with the childcare, or she is, or maybe she's the breadwinner, or maybe she's whatever it is, right? You begin appreciating all the stuff she's doing, who she is, and as you focus on that, because whatever you focus on, you feel. And so if you're focused on all these wonderful things, the value of your wife is literally increasing in your mind. Now, take this one step further, and you can voice these things to people, like your friend or your parent or your wife. Begin appreciating people in the real world. Hey, you know what, Kevin? I really appreciate how that you're always on time to our meetings, or I really appreciate that you took the time to explain that in depth to me so well. You begin appreciating people, and you're raising the value not only in your mind, hopefully in theirs, as they're hearing this. And so, when we appreciate and feel valued, we're enjoying the journey more, right?
Is this similar to what you do with your clients? Back to your
Yes.
example of, um, I'm sorry, you had three. One of them was flexible. What were the other two
Yeah,
you were mentioning?
resourceful, capable, and
Okay,
flexible.
resourceful, capable, and flexible. Do you start out that way? Like, hey, like write down at the end of the day every day. Keep a journal. I'm sure you'll share the method, but like, hey, write down even if you weren't thinking about it, where you could have considered yourself resourceful today?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're always looking for the evidence, always collecting evidence because, and tell me if you'd agree with this, we are masterful. We are so practiced that we are masters at amassing evidence that doesn't feel good, that doesn't move us forward. Right? We are so masterful at collecting evidence that says, "Oh my God, I'm a dumbass. Oh my God, I'll never get that. I'm always falling short. Things like that don't happen for me. Life's a struggle. Money's a struggle." We're constantly affirming these things that are not in alignment with the results that we want.
Why the hell do we do that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. The only reason is because we are practiced at it. It has been modeled for us
Mm.
from the get-go. And so my curriculum, Andrew, is actually called The Practice of Feeling Good in Business and in Life. And major emphasis on the word practice.
Mm.
So because for decades we've been masterfully practicing looking for life not working out, noticing what doesn't feel good, pointing out my shortcomings and pointing out your shortcomings, pointing out what the government should have done, should do, why the schools are falling apart. We are masterful at pointing out and noticing what doesn't work. And when we focus on it, does that feel good? It doesn't, does
Usually
it?
not.
No. When you're even in the moment, I mean, you could feel righteous, like, oh, I know how to
Oh,
run
sure.
this
Oh,
country.
100 oh
Give
yeah,
right,
absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
Give me the podium. I'll run this country. I'll show. Right. We feel self righteous, and that feels good for a moment, but actually, it doesn't serve us. It keeps us limited. It keeps us playing a small game. So what my clients begin doing from day one is we begin noticing where life is working out. Where did life work out for you today? What were the wins? Now, I know that sounds cliche, like life coach, like, oh, tell me about the wins. But I'm telling you this, it's not a small thing. Because if you ask some of your friends or family, like, hey, what's going well in your life? I one of the because this is how I frequently start out conversations with strangers because I didn't like one of the reasons why I stopped going to social functions or avoided them was because I couldn't stand the small talk because you in 5 minutes people are talking about what's not going well and everyone's agreeing about what's not going well and who is a jerk and who's an SOB and blah, right?
It happens quick. It
So
devolves real quick.
totally,
It
right?
totally does.
Because we're looking for things to agree upon. So we can agree on the weather, and we can agree on that guy who leading the country is an SOB, right? And I could do it better. So what I began doing years ago and made my social interactions way easier and way more interesting is I would sit down at the table, at a conference or wherever, and this is the first thing I'll say. Hey, so tell me something that's going well in your life. Now, first of all, this scrambles the brain. And usually the very thing they say, and I'm not joking, try this out. One of the first things they'll say back to you is this: what's going well in my life? They're caught off guard by this question. And they're not used to processing this question because how many times does somebody ask you, Andrew, so what's going well in your life? Right?
I've never gotten that question. Ever.
Right. So this is called a pattern interrupt. And I mean it literally goes like, what's going well in my life? And then they think about it and you can see them, they're like, really, it doesn't come easily because we're practiced at the opposite. So now so my whole thing is let's practice looking for life where life is working out. Because number one, it's going to help us, it's going to help give us access to another way of viewing the world. And it's a feel good way. And the thing about it, what's so weird is that everybody wants to feel good. Everything we do in life is designed to avoid pain and get pleasure, right? And so we are always looking to make progress. Why do we want progress? Why do you want progress in weightlifting? Because progress feels good, right? So we're always looking at how to feel good. It is abundantly easy to do that if we simply begin noticing where life is working out.
Yeah.
And and then here's the cool thing, Andrew. When I have these conversations with people, it also automatically creates a positive association with them. Now, next time they see me, they're like, "Hey, what's so tell me something that's going well in your life, right?" Now we've got this cool association. And it just feels good. And so again, I'm all about feeling good. And we've got it we've got all the tools, and you can create dopamine release and all those feel good chemicals on demand once we learn how to tap into it.
So I hear, and I totally agree with you. I totally agree that we all absolutely default to kind of focusing on the things that don't work. For me personally, I'm I don't think we actually ever do anything that doesn't serve us in some
Hmm.
degree. And as I've thought about this, not only when I speak, but when other people speak, especially when I speak though, I've noticed that I tend to, exactly to your point, grab onto, complain, and hold negatively the things that I actually literally don't have any control over.
Yes.
And so I think for me, where the self serving comes into place is, oh, if I can just complain about all the things that I know deep down I have no control over, the president, stock market, like whatever, like you name it,
Yeah. Yes.
it actually dissolves me of responsibility. And responsibility is hard and it's a struggle and it's painful. So I think there's some, and again, like I am not innocent of this. There's something about just complaining about the things that I have no control over. That's like, oh, if I could, it would be better, right? It dissolves
Hmm.
me. I can sit comfortably and watch TV because I can't change the things that I'm
Yeah.
complaining about. But it also requires a type of blindness. It requires me to be voluntarily blind to the issues of my own life. Why? Because it would require struggle and sacrifice in order to solve them.
Yes. Yes.
And so when I think that's at least the conclusion that I've come to. It's not a conclusion. I shouldn't say conclusion. Right now, it's a hypothesis. I'm sure it's something I'll noodle on for the rest of my natural life. Um, but yeah, have you noticed that thread as well, or am I alone in this? That everything that people tend to latch onto is generally outside their control.
Yeah. We in general, people feel out of control. And so when we make a judgment call, like I could do that better, or man, they don't know anything, or they're running the country wrong, it gives us a false sense of control, right?
Mm,
Right? It gives us a sense of righteousness, like I know something they don't. I could do that, They should do that. Like I know something they don't. It gives us, in the face of absolute no control, it gives us a sense of control because literally, um, I have the amount of control that I have over anything in my life is minuscule. I mean, I don't even control the blood flow in my body,
yeah.
right? I mean, I don't even control my ability to breathe. Now, I can influence it, but if I try to hold my breath till I might pass out, but then my body takes over. I don't even have control over that. Okay? I have very little control. I don't have any control over the weather. I don't have any control over the planet, whether a meteor hits us. I don't have control over the drivers coming towards me on the other side. I have very little control. And so knowing that, what if I just begin appreciating how the world is taking care of me? Wow, the sun came up today. It didn't have anything to do with me, but there it is on cue. Sweet, love it. What? Hey, spring, flowers are blooming, bees are coming out. everything's working as it's designed without any interference from me, without any input from me. Life is happening all around me and taking care of me. Pretty remarkable,
Yeah. And to
right?
bring it even closer home, this thought just came to my mind. I have a little bit more influence over like the quality of life for my spouse. Um, but I still don't have control over her. I still
No,
don't control her.
nope.
Not even a
In
little bit.
fact, nope. And most of us don't even control our thoughts,
I I had a feeling that's where you're gonna go with it. Absolutely. 100%.
right? I mean, the thoughts that come into our head show up without our permission, without our approval, and without our consent.
Mm.
I mean, isn't that accurate? I mean,
100,
thoughts.
absolutely.
I mean, it's not like you're sitting down with your cup of coffee or tea and thinking, okay, now what should I think next? Nope. The thoughts just show up without our permission.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. They absolutely do.
And most of them do not serve me well. Like if my thoughts were a person, I'd be like, get the hell out of here. I do not want you on my team. All you ever do is insult me and tell me crappy things about myself, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's a, your brain is it's a terrible servant, but it's an even worse master.
Yes. Yes. And again, this is not our fault, and it's 100% our responsibility, right?
I absolutely love that. I mean, are you familiar with Jocko Willink at all?
I'm not,
So he's
no.
a hardcore Navy SEAL guy. He was a commander in Ramadi, Iraq during kind of the really bad parts of the Iraq War. He has since come back, made a really powerful brand for himself. Pretty lucrative speaker. Has written a couple books, but he has a book completely dedicated to this extreme ownership.
Oh, I have heard of that
Okay,
book.
cool. And he makes that remark in the book that
Mm,
taking complete responsibility doesn't actually mean it was your fault, but it is still 100% your responsibility to
yes.
either correct the situation or make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And what a beautiful realization when we get to that point, because the only time that we can feel empowered in life, the only time, is when we take responsibility for the commitments we have made.
Mm,
Okay? So now you can feel happy, you can feel satisfied, but I'm talking about empowered. When If you want to feel empowerment in your life, you have to be taking responsibility for some type of commitment. So, having said that, we can also look at the times when we feel disempowered in our life. What's missing? No commitment that you can take responsibility for, right? So, if you want to actually feel empowered, like on demand, make a commitment and then begin taking responsibility for it. If your marriage is feeling like on the rocks or disempowered or empty, it's because one or both of you have stopped taking responsibility for the commitment that you made, right? If you if like you I assume that you feel empowered, a sense of empowerment when you go and lift weights and work out. Yes or no?
100%.
100%. And you probably feel disempowered anytime that there's been you fall off the bandwagon, right?
I feel real shitty.
Yeah,
Really, really bad. Yes.
because we stopped taking responsibility for that commitment. And so what needs to happen is, number one, we recommit or make a new commitment, right? Um, so yeah, so I love this. It's about taking responsibility for the commitments that we've made, and that is your key to empowerment.
Do you think it has to be um again, I have a feeling of what you're going to say, but I still want to ask.
Yeah.
Does this mean that so I think someone could listen to this conversation pretty easily and be like I can't commit 100% of my time to this thing, which fair. Like I'm a parent too. I work a 9 to 5. Like I get it. You need some time in the day, but I feel like this is going to go back to the journey piece. At least be 100% committed to at least making a small incremental bit of progress daily, weekly, monthly, whatever that is. I just think there's this common, and you know what? Maybe this is just an excuse on my part. It totally can be, but I kind of hear this. You need to commit 100%, um, and it's I don't have the willpower to commit 100% of my time. I just don't. I do, however, have the willpower and desire to at least make incremental gains.
Oh,
So
yeah.
call me
That's
out, Fletcher. Am I being a bitch? Or is this kind of the right track? Because things build on, like for example, like we're recording one podcast a week may be mentally draining for me. But at some
Mhm,
point, one becomes easy, and then I can
mhm.
challenge myself with two, and then
Yes.
three, and then I don't know if going
Yes.
beyond three is necessarily reasonable because there's editing and everything that has to be done. Um, but how does someone start taking 100% responsibility, and how do you help someone not feel overwhelmed by that prospect?
Okay. Really good questions. Number one, we can take 100% responsibility by simply waking up to the fact like, oh, yeah, everything, everything in my life is my responsibility. Now, I'm not saying you got to make all sorts of commitments left and right, but make a commitment. Take a baby step. In 2011, I completed an Ironman event. I didn't just go out and do that, right? It took a long time to work up to that, and so, but what I did was I made a commitment to showing up on a daily basis to do whatever that day's exercise was, right? So, I mean, at first it was a low mileage run, and then they started getting up in higher mileage runs, but it was, I committed to that workout. I didn't commit to like, okay, I'm going to do an Ironman, yippee, right? I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I'll do this workout. I'll do the workout on this day, which is this amount of running or this amount of swimming or this amount of biking, and I'll show up for that, right? So you make small commitments. Set yourself up for success. Make small commitments. Get practiced at showing up powerfully for the small things in your life. One of the things I have my clients do is I say, because I'll frequently ask them when the alarm goes off, because I'm all about being your word. I mean, if you can be your word, there's nothing you can't do. So, but don't say I'm going to be my word. I'm going to go do an Ironman. Here's what I want. Where I want you to start. Before you go to bed, you're going to set your alarm, right? Or maybe it's on a recurring alarm. And a lot of people, most people, I would say, their alarm goes off, and what do?
Snooze it.
Snooze it. Were they their word? The night before they said I'm going to get up at 6. Their alarm goes off at 6, and they snooze it. Already they broke the smallest commitment to themselves. They didn't get up on time. No power, no empowerment there. Now, it's not wrong. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just an example of if we can't be our word in the small things, the chance of us being our word in when it comes to the big stakes, not going to happen. So one of the things that my clients do is the night before you go to bed, set your alarm, and you're going to do one of two things. You're either the next morning, you're going to make a commitment to getting up when the alarm goes off, or make a commitment to snoozing it once or twice, but you get to say before it happens so that you're your word. We want to practice being our word in the smallest of small things. So, I mean, again, people. An example of this is, people will say, "Okay, I'll be there at 6:30." And 6:35 or 6:40 or 6:43, they show up.
Hmm.
No, there's not. It's not wrong. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. But there's no integrity in it. It's missing integrity. So if you're in the military and they say, oh, 6:30, you're gonna be there at 06:30, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be hell to pay if you're not. So, and why is that such a big deal? Because if you're out in the battlefield, you need to be able to know when somebody says they're going to do something, it's not even a question of whether they're going to do it. They're going to be their word. They're going to do it. So if we can be our word in the small things, I'm going to be there it's at 6:30. I'll be there at 6:30. You're there at 6:30, or you're there at 6:25, right? Be your word in the small things, and you'll see that you can be your word in the bigger things as well. But you got to start small. Make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. And as so one of my favorite books, as I'm sure there's a lot of people, is Atomic Habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something he talks about in there is that you like our brains are actually terrible at taking orders, but they're amazing at answering questions.
Yeah.
And so part of the advice that he gives in the book is, what would X person be doing right now? So for me, as someone that's, like trying to grow a podcast, trying to grow an audience, like I'll be forthright about that. I would love that. If it's like 7:30 and it's like, oh shoot, I do not feel like doing this. Well, what would a top tier podcaster do right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably work on the podcast. Um, but and there are other things like I would like to be a cleaner person. Well, what does that person do? They
Mm-hmm.
probably clean for 15 to 30 minutes a day. Like that's not a lot of time, but they do it daily. And
Yeah.
so I downloaded an app that it's like just a habit tracker. And I said I have to work on the podcast for an hour a night. Editing videos, recording, doing something, and I have to clean for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found it to be too much.
Okay.
And kind of to your point, what I did was my goal is now to clean for at least 1 minute.
I love it.
Because what's 1 minute? I can clean. There's enough junk on my desk right now. There's a minute. Done.
I love it.
I can work on my podcast at least 5 minutes, right? I can do something for 5 minutes. That's incredibly easy. But what I actually find myself doing is that, yeah, one night I set a timer for 1 minute and I only clean for 1 minute because I just really don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
But then other nights I clean for 30. Same thing with the podcast. Like some days it's just 5 minutes. I did it. I told myself I would do it daily. There's my 5 minutes. But then
I
other
love
days it turns into 2 hours.
I love it. And so what you're doing is really really it's going to serve you well, because you're setting yourself up for success. You're setting yourself up because every time you clean, even for the 1 minute, you said you were going to do it. You were your word. You kept your word to yourself. You're like, oh, there I go again. Of course I did it, because I'm a type of person that keeps my word, right? So your brain sees that. Oh, of course I cleaned for 5 minutes today because I said I was going to. And I'm the person that keeps my word. How do I know I'm a person that keeps my word? Because I look back and I see all these times where I've kept my word to myself. And so you build up all these little successes, and then when you get to the point where you're tempted to not keep your word, it doesn't feel right. It feels like it's out of alignment. It's out of integrity. You begin to feel more and more when let me rephrase that. You begin to notice the feeling of being out of integrity, Most of us don't notice it because we spend the majority of our time out of integrity. And I'm not pointing fingers except for at me, right? Because
Sure.
this used to be me, right?
100%.
I mean, oh yeah, I'll be there at 6:30. Where's Fletcher at 7:15? Right? Yeah, 6:30, 7:15. What's the difference? Big deal, right? That was me, right? So, but I love that you're setting yourself up for those small successes, because while they're small, they're still significant.
Mhm.
So good job.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be better at it. I love seeing like the consecutive days build up, and it's like,
Yeah.
and I think if Fletcher, I mean, it's so obvious you're incredibly wise. One of my something I want to dive into is like you're actually just based off the system that you just kind of laid out. You're actually making it more painful not to do the dishes than to do it. And I
Yes.
think that tends to be my issue with most modern coaches, is that there's this is going to sound really weird, but there's almost too much positivity. There's too much, whatever, you know and they don't go much deeper than that. But I, like, as you said that, I was like, that is so incredibly impactful, because you're
Mhm.
building so much. Like, as a kid, when you find out that Santa's not real, it's painful. It
Right.
sucks. I remember going to my room and crying. Like, I remember that. I was 17 at the time, so it's like, like when but I think that's I mean, that obviously struck a chord with me. Like, you're building so much evidence to one side,
Yes.
to the positive side, that it will actually cause you psychological pain to do something contrary to it.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the key is to be, that's why I say I spend a lot of effort noticing where life is working out for me, noticing the wins. Why? Because when I find myself focusing on what's not working in the world, it becomes really a feeling of yuckiness,
Mm,
right? I'm like, oh, I feel dirty, or I feel yucky, or I feel like it's not in alignment with who I want to be, right?
yeah.
Um, and so I don't hang out there. I don't get stuck there like I used to get stuck, right? I still go in and out of it, right? But I'm aware. I have just a greater awareness. And all life is the sum of our awareness. The greater your awareness,
Mm.
the greater amount of or the the greater your awareness is, the more life you are living, right? It's like, are you living like this, looking through a tiny little tunnel, or are you looking like this, where you're taking a much bigger, grander view of life?
I love that. I can't tell you how profound I feel that is. Just that statement of just build so much evidence that acting anywhere contrary is painful for you.
Yes. Yeah. Because every single decision you make in your life is influenced by pain and pleasure.
Mm,
E- Every single decision you make is informed by pain or pleasure,
yeah.
no matter how mundane.
Yes.
Do you're drinking Mountain Dew, right?
Yep.
Why you drink Mountain Dew?
Because it tastes good and it gets me hyped up. Absolutely.
Yep.
Uh huh.
It's so pleasurable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you drink green tea right now instead?
Because green tea is kind of gross.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
it's painful, right?
100%.
Everything comes down to pain and pleasure. So most of us will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. So this really is simply about understanding how to begin to get pain and pleasure, or the carrot and the stick,
Yeah.
to work for us instead of against us.
Yeah. Is this when you start this process with your clients, do you do this mainly from an observational standpoint? Um, or does it evolve into go create your own evidence? And to kind of dive into that, it's like that resourcefulness. Hey, yeah, I want to view myself as resourceful. Is this a hey, well, go build your own evidence, or is this a matter of you're obviously resourceful to some degree? Let's just start observing the resourcefulness that you already contain
Hmm.
and then build on it later.
Yeah, so it's a combination of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So most people have overlooked that they are in fact resourceful, capable, and flexible. Most people have overlooked that they do in fact have what it that they have inside already everything that they need. And so yes, there's a lot of observing. There's a lot of question and answer. Right. There's a lot of conversation, and then we set some outcomes that we want to produce, and we use the technology or these distinctions to help guide them, because really what this is about is just like setting up guide rails for them to begin to create powerfully, like when you first go bowling. I mean, the gutter, it goes in the gutter almost every time, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're a little kid, they have those little rails that you can put up, and it keeps in the
Or
line,
or
in the
adults.
lane. Yeah, or adults. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So this is really what I'm doing is we're just putting in some rails that they can kind of bounce off, but keep them moving towards the desired outcome. And really, the biggest thing that we're doing is helping keep their thoughts in alignment with the outcome, because that's whatever we focus on, you feel.
Mhm.
And the greatest example of this, and I'll say that again because I really want people to hear this, whatever you focus on, wherever you put your focus, you will have an emotional response to that. And it doesn't matter if it's real or not real, true or not true. And the perfect example of this is when we go to a movie theater. We walk into the theater, we get our snacks, we sit down, the lights go down, movie comes up, and 10 minutes into it, we're laughing our butt off, right? We're just, oh my gosh, that's so funny. And then another 10 minutes go by and we might be choking back tears, or maybe we're just flat out sobbing. And then another 20 minutes later, we're on the edge of our seat, right? And we're like our heart rate is actually increased. We might even be perspiring, right? Now, we've just been through an emotional roller coaster, and all we're doing is watching light on a screen. There is nothing remotely real about it. However, your brain doesn't have that understanding. Your brain is focused on a situation, and your brain can't tell the difference. It literally cannot tell the difference between what's real and what is not real. And so if you're focused on it, the brain interprets it as being real. And so you have a real emotional reaction to it. So having said that, and which by the way is why when you go to sleep at night, your body releases this chemical that partially paralyzes the body. So you don't get up and start acting out your dreams, right? I mean, this is why people talk in their sleep, and sometimes people do get up and walk around. But I mean, you have this
And why
chemical that's
people
released.
sometimes have night terrors as
Yes,
well, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So whatever you focus on, you feel. In fact, the famous Harvard study, I think it was in 1979 or something like that, or maybe it was in the early 80s. But anyways, they took these piano players, um, uh, very established piano players. They had them. They mapped their brain, hooked them up to all these wires, and watched their brain while they were reading this piano piece and playing it. Then they brought them back into the room another day, hooked them all up to map their brain. And this time, no piano. They were only supposed to uh, imagine playing that piece. And sure enough, the exact same areas of the brain lit up, and just as if they were playing it for real.
Yeah.
So whatever you focus on, you feel. Whatever you focus on expands, and whatever you focus on, ultimately, you manifest.
I think a very similar, I thought it was at Harvard as well. I think there was a very similar study where they took uh, rather rookie basketball players, young basketball players that were just being introduced and learning the sport. One group went and pretended, or not pretended, they went and visualized that they were shooting free throws. And
Mm-hmm.
another group actually went and did it. And at the end of, I think it was like an 8-week study, the group that just thought about it improved just as much as the group that was actually going and playing.
Yeah,
Now, I'm sure at some point you do have to involve the physical. There may be some diminishing returns there, but regardless, it's this idea that you're going to experience things just in thought.
exactly.
Um, just because I'm curious, what's kind of like your average? You talk about the texts and the emails that you get, which you have a little YouTube video that I watched beforehand. Like they're cool, they're fun to read, and it's
Mm-hmm.
actually I kind of it's a compliment to you, but they're all like I was really hesitant, kind of skeptical, but holy shit, this is awesome, right? That's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
essence of a lot of them. How quickly you know how quickly do you generally see like this start to turn around? If someone's really diligent, every night they sit down and be like, okay, let me think about the day and look for all the times that I was resourceful without even trying. How
Mm-hmm.
long does that generally take in your experience for someone recording that evidence to actually start to feel a shift?
Yeah. So my curriculum that my clients go through is a year-long curriculum, and it's broken up into 3-month chunks. And so after that first, it's about halfway through the first 3-month period where the light bulbs, you just see like the light bulbs going
So
off,
cool.
and they're yeah, or going on, I should say. They're going on, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, why haven't I learned this before? Why don't I know about this? um and they begin to see, and what they're beginning to see is what's possible for their lives. And it is so exciting for when you see somebody who had an idea, because what we do is we break down all their limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And when they give me their limiting beliefs, Andrew, they've got bags full of evidence for their disempowering beliefs. I mean, they are professional when it comes to arguing for their limitations. Professional,
Yeah,
right?
I probably fall into that
Eh,
category. Most
Me
likely.
too.
Yeah.
Me too, right? And so what happens is when they get insight into, like, oh my God, I can cut that bag loose, and I'm going to start collecting new evidence. It becomes a very exciting prospect. um, and because what begins to see because then they begin seeing new, like, real outcomes in their life. I'll give you a quick example. But my wife and I used to do this seminar called Diabetes Smackdown: The Ultimate Solution, and it was for people who were at risk for type 2 diabetes or who had type 2 diabetes. And these people, they who showed up, I mean, bless their hearts, they are deeply depressed, many of them, because they're at their wits' end. All right, they're coming here. They've tried medications, they've tried the diets, they've seen physicians, they've done it all. Many of them have lost weight only to regain it and gain more. I mean, some of them are looking at facing amputation, blindness. I mean, it's hardcore. Type 2 diabetes is a terrible disease, and it sneaks up on you. It doesn't hurt until it's too late, right? Anyway, the these people get to see what's possible for their lives, and they start collecting evidence. And I'm thinking of these three women in particular who just I'll never forget, because after this weekend seminar, they enrolled in my coaching course, and a year later, all three of them finished their first ever triathlon. Yeah, it was a big deal.
Whoa! I
A-
was not
And
expecting that. Whoa!
and one of them was 70 years old. Okay, yeah. So they came off many of their medications. Their depression was gone. I mean, they were biking, swimming, and running. So
It's so cool.
yeah, that's a talk about dramatic transformation, right?
100%. Holy cow.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
Fletcher, let's leave people on a little cliffhanger there. Where can people find your curriculum, find you, find your coaching, find your content?
Yeah, you bet. So the easiest way to go find me is at fletcherellingson.com or thepracticeoffeelinggood.com. Either one will take you to my website.
And we'll link both in
And
the show notes. So,
yeah, yeah, great, great. Yeah, and you can find me on Facebook, but I was severely hacked, and Facebook closed my account down, so I'm just rebuilding it. Um,
brutal.
but go to my website. There's some free resources there, good stuff. And then if you want a discovery call, let's have a discovery call. It's an hour-long call. It's free. There's no obligation. There's no hard sales. You just get to see if we're a good fit. And I tell you about the course, and I get to hear what's going on for you. And if there's an outcome that you really want to create in your life, more health, wealth, and relationship, whatever it is, it's all possible.
Fletcher, you're amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.